All right, hi everybody. I'm Riste. I am a challenger Garen, one trick of North America. I have over 600 league points, and I've been involved with the champion for a very, very long time. Today, what we have posted is new Garen changes for the champion on the PBE coming soon. I don't know if it's going to be uploaded later tonight or updated later tonight, I should say, or possibly in the future. I'll go ahead and extensively test this on the PBE, but I'm going to go ahead and talk in today's video as a challenger Garen main what I think of these changes and a little bit of backstory as to how these changes came to surface. All right, so since I'm part of the LPP and I am a pretty sizably known Garen player, Ryan actually went ahead and contacted me to speak about my thoughts about how Garen could be improved in the future. I spoke the right axes within several emails through correspondence over the course of the last few months, and I suggested several things which have surfaced in this list of changes that I think are really, really cool. And we're going to go ahead and break them down really quickly, so I hope you guys enjoy. All right, we're going to go ahead and start off with the passive, all right, which no longer doubles at 25 to 50% health. Now, if you think about this, the second component of this passive was more impactful than the first component. I almost never use this. Garen players almost never use this, because if you think about it this way, if you're critically low, unless you have jungle assistance on the way, chances are you're going to get tower dive. You have to force yourself to back anyway. There's only few very, very niche applications where this first component actually did anything. The 50% part was actually really nice, but we'll talk a little bit further about how this going away doesn't really matter too much, and it's how it's going to be better for the champion, all right? So here we go. We have the passive cooldown being changed from 9 to 6. So that means it's going to take 6 seconds for the new passive to activate. This is a little bit of a middle ground. It's going to be a nerf to late, but then also a little bit of a buff to early, which we're going to talk a little bit later on, but Garen is going to be centralized more into a winning the war of attrition champion. And I think that's actually pretty okay, because that's a very, very fundamental type of basically avenue for the champion to thrive. It's very educational for players. Garen is a beginner champion, so I think a champion that teaches players how to win the war of attrition, basically combating sustain versus sustain, pacing out your trades really well. This is really good. And Garen stays thematic to it, so really, really great. So here we go. Non-epic monsters don't break it at level 11. Non-epic monsters never break it. Now, this is really big for Garen jungle. I'm personally not a fan of Garen jungle. The reason being, and historically, is just that his passive stays off the entire time before level 11. His clear is absolutely terrible. His ganks are very, very weak. But the thing is, I support off meta, so a change like this definitely benefits somebody wanting to play Garen jungle. I honestly feel like the juggernauts could exist healthily in the jungle. So opening up this diversity a bit by making this change is fine. I don't know if this change is a bit too strong, but Riot Games could do an alternative, is keep the passive on, but then instead, if you're getting hit by minions and monsters, maybe reduce the effectiveness of the passive to 50%. That might be a little bit safer, but just keeping the passive on would be very, very helpful for anybody wanting to try Garen jungle. So now let's go ahead and talk about the heal amount. This is the biggest part of the passive, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to talk about this. It goes from the 8 jump at level 11, and it's going to go ahead and go into a hierarchy where you basically get value per level. I think this is really cool, because this also buffs Garen's level 6 power spike. Because the thing is, at level 6, you know, you get access to the villain mechanic. That's nice. If you're able to focus the villain and they're right in front of you in lane, that's really good too. But the thing is, if you're not able to do that, Garen's passive seems really, really weak at level 6. This is why this change system, I think, is actually pretty interesting to look at. And I think it could be appreciated by Garen players en masse, just because now you're getting value out of every level. So it scales pretty slow at first, but then once you get to level 7 to 13, that's when the percent starts jumping up a bit. Then towards level 14, 18, it goes for a slower scale. So it's still kind of structured around that mid-game power spike, but you're going to definitely see it pick up a lot faster, which is good, because I've talked with several Garen players that just really, really express their frustration about Garen's enhanced passive not coming online enough. But with these changes, you can actually fill it towards level 7 and beyond, which is really good. I have experienced this difficulty where I'm like really, really, I'm really, really sizably ahead. But since my passive is so weak, unless I have like good potions, or I have some rejuvenation beads, or I have my Doran shield, if I have all those sources together, if I'm not really winning the war of attrition too well, I really can't push my lead. Or, like, for example, I just took a really, really bad fight, or maybe I got a kill, but I'm critically low, I'm forced it back. I think that these changes really support Garen being able to stay out in games longer. That it really accentuates his strength as a champion. So I really like that there's definitely a big, spread out type of scaling towards his mid game, but still a little bit extra scaling late game too. If you guys don't know, in the past, Garen's passive used to be structured towards a level 1, level 11, and then level 16. Garen's old level 16 passive I thought was tremendously good because it allowed him to basically heal back up really, really quickly. It was definitely a sizable late game power spike and allowed him to basically just say, okay, I'm done with the team fight. I'm going to heal back up to full health within 15 seconds, and now I can go ahead and tank this Baron. So I like that they're buffing it so he gets an extra 2% late game. That's actually really, really cool. Now, obviously, since if you're critically low, they're doing away with the 50% boost passive, so this is going to equalize a little bit. But at the same time, it's going to be good past the 50% mark because you're going to be healing more HP. So depending on how much you're waiting on Garen's passive, this is going to be ultimately a win. I think that these changes are going to be really good. And it definitely helps Garen scale into becoming a more threatening pick. So we'll talk really briefly about what problems Garen has right now. Garen's a tremendously weak top laner. In low elo, obviously, we can't really talk about that because there's a lot of punishable champions and a lot of players that just don't understand Garen's trading patterns enough and get punished way too hard by the champion. But we're going to be talking about high-elo Garen and how he has almost no type of winning matchups top lane unless you're up against somebody who's autofilled or first timing a champion, right? Garen right now currently has really, really bad trading patterns that endanger him. He can't trade with tanks because the percent maximum health damage basically matches his damage. He can't stack Conqueror. He loses versus Conqueror laners because, of course, true damage bypasses his bulk resistances through W, right? So Garen's, and then on top of this too, we're also dealing with a bunch of range mages, the Klepto mages, the Nars, the Timos, the Kennons, the range Yordles. We even have Tristana going top lane too. So Garen doesn't really have a thriving environment top lane. That's what really cuts down his viability. My typical go-to when I play top lane is like, okay, let me farm, and then I'll try to outplay them once I have my first item, or I'm towards level 11, or they're the villain. I have to be so opportunistic. Garen's a juggernaut right now, but he has like no really good ways to trade. Even versus like champions that you think Garen would be, like Poppy, right? I actually have to rush items such as Raptor's Cloak and wait for the champion to go out of mana so I can actually start trading with her. It's really, really crazy, and Garen's just not threatening enough as a Juggernaut, which is why I definitely helped Riot Games, or I tried to encourage Riot Games to make changes like this, so we can see Garen as a more threatening pick, because he's a Juggernaut who should have threatening damage, guys. But in high-low, it's just can't be seen. I have to sit at tower in almost every linear phase I play top lane. I'm even playing middle just so I can actually have control over a game, because Garen's winning matchups right now are almost non-existent top lane. So this passive change really helps with the War of Attrition. Now we're gonna go ahead and talk about I'm gonna go ahead and talk about the E first. I'm gonna skip over the W here because I want to go ahead and wrap around my point so we can drive it home really quickly about why his power is being adjusted quite a bit. So I'm gonna skip the W. Let's talk about the E really quickly. So Garen's spin model is being changed to, instead of him having 5 spins. Now, for anybody who doesn't know Garen's a champion who gets spins per level, which means that even if you put 5 points into his spin, his damage on his spin doesn't fully scale until level 16. That's why it's because he starts with 5 spins at the first rank, but that's level 1. At level 4, he gets an additional spin. At level 7, so it's every 3 levels. So 4, 7, 10, 13, and 16. Which means that Garen starts the game off with 5 spins, but as he gets champion levels, the ability scales with champion levels, he can get spins, which increases the frequency, of course, the ratio of the spins, and then increases his damage. It was Riot Games' basically way of saying, okay, we want to make sure that spin has damage, but we can't make it scale too hard, so we're basically gating that scaling until late game, which I guess was understandable at the time. They're mixing it up here by changing it, so he starts off with 8 spins, 8 spins at first rank. And now that he won't get spins per level anymore. He's going to get spins per attack speed. So this is really, really crazy now, because Garen can now actually build attack speed items. Many Juggernauts in League of Legends can splash attack speed items, but Garen has historically been one of the worst champions possible to do it. Like right now, there's no reason to build Blade the Rune King on Garen, which is an amazing anti-tank item. But the thing is, Garen's spin doesn't apply on hit effects, and it's a large portion of Garen's damage time, right? Because that uptime on the spin is 3 seconds. That's 3 seconds that you're not auto attacking. So Garen right now can only really buy certain attack speed items because every other attack speed item just doesn't work on him, right? Trendy Force is probably the best item for him because of course the movement speed, the Spellblade passive, and then the attack speed basically helps increase his damage a bit when it spins down. But with this type of change, Garen's itemization actually increases. It's more varied. People can go more different builds now, and this is actually really cool because not only does this buff Trinity Force Garen, which is a very, very valid item on him at the moment, but this also allows him to try out different items, such as Blade the Rune King. And we're also going to talk about Frozen Mallet, too, because as we can see later on here in the list, his spin can now apply on-hit effects, but there's a catch. There's a big catch here. So you might be thinking, okay, Garen's spin applies on-hit effects. That sounds very, very busted. And then, yes, I do have to resonate with you. Yes, it does sound really busted. However, Riot Games did put a little bit of a contingency plan in here and made a specific counterplay for this spin in general. Now, what I mean by this is his on-hit effects through spin can only apply to the closest enemy that he's hitting. Now, this includes minions as well, meaning that there is counterplay valid. So if an opponent fights in the his minion wave and you're hitting them with their spin, if the opponent positions minions between Garen and himself, he won't be hit with that bonus damage. The minion's going to get hit with the bonus damage instead. So honestly, I feel like that is a very good safeguard, because if Garen's spin was able to apply on-hit effects to every single target it was hitting, yes, this would be absolutely busted in terms of change. So I like the counterplay element. I definitely like the counterplay element, but not only does he get to benefit from attack speed now, but now his spin is actually able to apply in some shape or form on hit effects, which means Blade the Rune King is a viable option on Garen. Frozen Mallet now is more viable. Wit's End versus those split pushing or those mages top lane, or like for example Victor or Swain, very, very good. Garen's itemization choices really increase, and I think this ultimately is a good thing for the champion. Why is that? It's because Garen's skill expression right now is basically building the right items in certain situation. I build completely differently almost every single game I play. But the thing about Garen is that he possesses so many different like classifications of qualities right now, right? He's got assassin-like qualities, he's got bruiser-like qualities, he's got tank-like qualities. As such, he's able to buy a multitude of different items because he just fits in all these little categories that he could technically go ahead and somewhat assume, but you know, obviously he's like a jack of all trades, a master of nothing, right? You can go for like a full tanky Garen build, you can go for like a critical strike Garen build, you can go for like a more glass cannon bursty type of build with maybe like a lethality item, you can go for the Trinity Force build, you can go for like a split pushing build, you can go for a team fighting build. Garen's itemization right now is one of the biggest avenues of skill expression for the champion. So pushing this further, I think, is really good for the champion because we're going to see more diverse Garen builds. We're going to see more interesting type of paths to approach the champion. Garen's has to be a simplistic champion, right? Because he's easy to pick up. You know, he's good for beginners. But just how Garen mains can push the champion further by building a certain way and being rewarded for it is really, really cool and fascinating. And it just makes the champion more interesting. You know, I look at champions that build the same thing over and over, and I just don't look at that as interesting. So you guys can disagree, but I think Garen being able to build more items and having different types of builds is a good thing for the champion. All right, so we'll talk really quickly about the damage here. The damage is getting nerfed. This is to compensate for obviously his itemization spiking his damage and of course factoring in on hit. I think this is totally justified. Because with Riot Games and making these changes, they're anticipating that people are going to go ahead and abuse this mechanic or just use it for that matter. So I think they're being cautious, and I think they're being good by just going ahead and nerfing it slightly. They're nerfing the 80 ratio, they're nerfing the base a little bit. It's not too heavy of a nerf, but it's definitely a good precaution. I did want to iterate that these changes won't ship perfectly. There are going to be some adjustments, but just on paper, this is looking very, very bright for this champion. Very, very much so. So they're getting rid of the isolation bonus, his old isolation bonus, replacing it with a new one, where if he hits the target, the closest enemy that he hits is going to have 25% bonus damage. So the isolation bonus is going to go down a bit by 8%. But now that it applies on hit effects, that's still going to be a sizable damage boost. So if you can expect a Garen player building Blade the Rune King, which is 40% attack speed, that means that the champion basically is getting 11 spins instead of 10, which is enhancement and damage. He gets to apply the maximum percent HP damage on the closest target. He gets the Blade of the Wrong King active. And he gets the lifesteal. But the thing about the spin is I don't think it's going to apply the lifesteal, so obviously that's going to be the component of the item that's going to be, unfortunately, underutilized. But this diversifies Garen's itemization. It really does. The trade-off is if a Garen player is building a glass cannon item first, he's going to be more frail. We're going to go ahead and cement that point in later on when we go to the W change, but we're going to talk about the ultimate next. So the villain mechanic is a big portion of Garen's damage, and it has been systematically for many, many years now. Anybody who doesn't know, the last person who got the most kills in the last 5 minutes becomes the villain. The person who is marked with the villain, the big sword over his head, by the way, or her head, gets dealt bonus damage on Garen's spin, auto attacks, and then the ultimate gets converted into true damage completely. They are officially trying to get rid of it with these changes, and I know that's pretty crazy, pretty drastic, but I'm ultimately in support of the villain mechanic being removed because there are some frustrating elements of the kit that I can resonate with other Garen players, and I really feel like that in order for Garen to succeed as a champion, villain has to go away. And here are my thoughts. There are situations late game where I want to go ahead and focus the villain, but it's the support. It's the Yuumi who's attached to the Sejuani, and I can't focus the villain, which means I have no way to maximize my damage because I can't reach my target, who's the villain, or the target is completely undesirable, where I'm dealing with a Kai'Sa with a 1k gold bounty, but it's on the brand support who's 0 and I'm not 0 and 5, but 2 and 5 because he picked up 2 kills late game randomly. And the Kai'Sa just hasn't picked up any kills late because of the brand chaos with his ultimate, his pyroclasm. So it's just that there's so much rampancy in the villain mechanic that you can't control it, right? It can't be controlled. And it's that lack of control that really brings a frustrating element to Garen because a lot of people consider it to be RNG. It goes by an algorithm, but just not having any control over that algorithm is really, really frustrating for a lot of Garen players, and it irks me too. Because I just don't get to decide who the villain is. It's basically completely reactionary. Garen's agency right now is hindered because he has so many reactionary elements in his kit. And I'm pushing and encouraging Riot to push these changes forward. So that way Garen's reactionary playstyle basically goes down a bit and his proactive game style goes up. His agency goes up. He's able to do more things instead of having to react to things. That's actually really, really good for the champion. So they're removing the villain passive entirely, which means that the bonus damage, percent maximum health, 1% per tick of spin and auto attacking is going away. So that's gone. Now they're making his ultimate always deal true damage. Now you might think that this is going to be a crazy change, but you got to think about Garen's ultimate. It can hit for a ton of damage, but it's not entirely modernized, I would say, in my opinion. You got to look at champions like Pyke's ultimate, right? Pyke's ultimate is AoE. It can nab the opponent bonus. It can nab his allies bonus gold. It has a reset on it, and it actually uses true damage with a good execute threshold that goes past shields. So they're kind of modernizing Garen's ultimate a bit by making it always deal true damage, which is good, by the way, which is very, very good. I'll tell you why in a second. But they're also nerfing the damage overall, which I think is justified because obviously this is a big change, and Garen always having a true damage ultimate is going to be a big thing, right? So they're nerfing the damage slightly. It's 25 damage at rank 1. It's going to be 50 damage at rank 2, 75 damage at rank 3. This will be noticeable, and any longtime Garen player will notice this. But I definitely think that this is good. Oh, yes, they're nerfing the percent missing HP too. So, yes, Garen's ultimate is never going to be able to deal as much damage as against the villain in the past. So, Garen players will have to get used to his ultimate not doing as much damage. But just the consistency of always having a true damage ultimate available is going to be a very reliable thing for Garen players. Why is this? In solo queue, there are more and more team comps that are just surfacing with versatile AP picks, which means that, you know, it's very, very common in League of Legends for a team to be saturated with mage picks. The adverse effect to this, though, is that if you play on a team with Garen that's very, very AP heavy, you're actually kind of screwing yourself over a bit. Why is this? It's because if you're not focusing the villain, your ultimate, as it is right now in live, does magic damage completely. But if the enemy team is stacking Nullifying Orbs, Maul Malmortius, this is the adverse side effect. These items actually counter Garen's ultimate, right? It's really, really crazy. And it's such a dangerous thing to be on a team that's full AP because technically the itemization that they're catering towards your allies is actually harming you too. So I really support these changes because now there's not going to be a spell shield type of counterplay. Now it's basically either you stack health or you're at a good amount of health. Otherwise, you're going to die to Garen's ultimate, and Garen's ultimate's now threatening, right? I think they need to make Garen a more threatening champion that has more agency, and these changes will definitely push that. So now we're going to go ahead and go up to Garen's W, because I'm going to talk about the big cost for all of these changes, right? Garen's getting a lot of a lot of levers, a lot of whistles. He's getting a lot of damage perks. His damage is going up overall. His ultimate damage goes down a bit, but the true damage conversion is definitely going to be a reliable change. What are they doing in return? They're nerfing his W. They're reverting it back to the old way it was last season in Season 8. And I fully support this, and here's why. Okay, so they're bringing it back to its completely original iteration back in 2018, right? Where you only get 0.25 magic resistance and armor per unit. The maximum cap is 30, and you have to kill now 160 units to basically fully stack it. I think this is good for the champion, and here's why. Garen's durability right now is extremely, extremely good. I am playing games right now where I am able to hit almost 100 magic resistance without building a single MR item in my champion's kit, and that's extremely good versus mages, right? It frees up Garen's dependency to build any magic resistance in the game right now, because you can go ahead and get such a high amount of MR for free, right? If I build Demon's Plate and fully stack up my W, I'm breaching 200 armor before the 15-minute mark if I rush it first item. That is crazy, crazy good versus full AD team comps too. Just the concept of having 50 bonus armor magic resistance makes Garen the most durable juggernaut right now in League of Legends. And that could be okay and good for the game, and it really carves out an identity for Garen, but is it the best one? I definitely disagree. It's also a large portion of his power budget right now, and honestly, I feel like for a Garen player looking to climb through solo queue, it just doesn't really help him as much. You know, it definitely encourages him to build tankier instead of possibly going for like a more damage heavy build, even though the resistances do iron out a good bruiser build, right? But it's always going to be that same BC into Deadman's or Sterix Gauge or Triforce, you know, right? Garen's itemization is always going to be the same in that factor, and that's you know, that can be fine. It doesn't have to change. But pushing these buffs onto W over the last year hasn't been really helping out the champion in terms of agency, because Garen's a champion with 80 ratios, meaning that if you're ahead, you want to go ahead and build those items to basically push his damage forward. This is more of a problem in low elo, because it's my understanding that in low elo, people just have itemization problems. People aren't really too precise. They'll follow their itemization paths like a cooking recipe. So if you have a Garen in low elo, right, in bronze or silver or iron, who basically has 150 armor magic resistance before the 15-minute mark, you're going to have those people that don't have the confidence to really say, okay, well, maybe I should push my armor penetration up a bit further because Garen's a mega tank right now. I'm not going to be able to kill him. That doesn't happen too commonly, because precise confidence to basically act upon changing up your item build in low elo just, you know, it isn't going to happen as much. The confidence and the players in low elo just isn't there. People follow their builds really religiously. If they follow it very statically, that benefits Garen, because if Garen has to play versus a team comp with no armor penetration items or no magic penetration items, he basically is a walking tank that has good damage and he's unkillable. So honestly, I feel like these changes are going to make Garen more frail into the late game, right? Because he's losing 20 armor, 20 magic resistance, and that's okay. You know, juggernauts are supposed to fall off late game, right? Technically, right? They're supposed to be frail, you know, they're supposed to be not invincible. Garen will be a little bit more vulnerable with these changes, but on the plus side, he's definitely gaining more agency and gaining more damage options, and I feel like that's really, really good. And this has a greater dependency on his itemization, because now if a Garen player says, okay, I'm really ahead, what do I build defensively? They no longer can depend on building excessive bruiser health items and just saying, well, I got effective HP anyway because I just got 50 armor and magic resistance for free. So I don't even have to build a Spear of Visage because I basically got that value of MR in my kit for free. That's the issue right now. It's so easy to go ahead and build bruiser item after bruiser item, and not even worry about having to build a single tank defensive item, maybe except Demon's Plate because it enhances our mobility. Just because you create so much effective HP through the free 50. On top of that too, stacking is very, very quick. Very, very quick. I get it fully stacked towards 15 minutes, and that's a very, very big power spike. You throw conditioning on top of that, and you are basically walking with a walking You're basically walking with a free aftershock, guys. You know, you guys think how strong aftershock is? Garen basically, if you get that with conditioning, you can go ahead and roam around the map basically with an aftershock up 100% of the time. That's how tanky Garen is. I want Garen to be a little bit more fragile, so that way he has a little bit more exploitation in low elo. That way his win rate isn't entirely high. Again, I'm not looking to break my champion here. I definitely want Garen's win rate to be okay in low elo. But the thing is, if you make Garen too tanky, he just has no room to be buffed, right? So no changes can be. I don't think any changes can happen unless his W goes away a little bit. They're also nerfing the cooldown too. That's fine. This is good, a skill expressive thing, because again, if the cooldown is higher, that means that timing your W and using it in the right situation is definitely more dependent on skill expression, and it matters more, right? You don't get it up as much. And that's good, because if Garen's W is down, that's a window for the enemy team to engage. That's counterplay. That's good for the game, right? Garen's W is a big get out of jail free card right now. So increasing the cooldown, bringing it back to its original amount from last year is fine. I support it. It's okay. So ultimately, yeah, this is going to be a really, really big change list. I can't expect Riot Games to get this perfect, because I honestly don't anticipate them to do it. Because it's difficult to land this perfectly. This is going to be really, really big. So they might have to adjust this a little bit to make sure it hits the ground running without making Garen entirely broken. Some possible safeguards that they could add to make this a little bit more safe and not too risky is if the spin applies on hit effects, maybe they can bring it down to 75% per effectiveness. Because you got to think about it this way. If you're hitting one target and there's no minions around, having 10 Blade of the Ruin King procs in like 3 seconds, that sounds very, 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 very strong. So maybe maybe they can throw a safeguard in where they bring it down to 75% effectiveness or 50% effectiveness. So yeah, they're everything on this list, guys, is not going to be final. You can expect some of this to change, but just the chunk of the information that we have received here and that I've discussed with Riot and we push forward. The concept of these changes, even though the numbers aren't final, is good for the champion. And it's going to take some time for Riot Games to find the sweet spot, but ultimately I think Garen's going to be a better champion as a result. And I think people are going to enjoy him more because the villain rampancy goes away. His itemization precision goes up. His skill expression goes up. His dependency for correct itemization goes up. And his damage as a Juggernaut actually it comes back and he can actually duel as a Juggernaut, because Garen's dueling potential right now is absolutely terrible, and it's tied to the villain mechanic, meaning that there are so many champions like him that I can't fight because I have to depend on the villain mechanic. If I say to somebody, okay, that Renekton's got a Spear of Sojin, I can't fight him at all. Why? It's because if he's not the villain, all my damage, my highest threshold of damage, the villain mark, is basically on somebody else, and that means I can't fight. You know, Garen's a champion right now who's a Juggernaut who can't duel anybody unless he's either A, blatantly fed, or B, it's tied to the villain mechanic. And that type of chaotic type of shift is just not good for the champion, I think. So you guys feel free to go ahead and chime in the comments below as to what you guys think about this rework. I'm not going to go ahead and rant on and on about this, so I'm just going to go ahead and keep things concise. Ultimately, in conclusion, I think this is going to be better for the champion. I think Garen's a little bit more consistent. His core pattern is now cemented a little bit without having to deal with a rampant mechanic that gets placed on crazy targets that you don't want late game. Garen's snowball potential will be stronger, but he was going to be more frail late game, and that's fine, because if the Garen goes too deep in and he dies as a result because he loses that 20 armor and MR, that's on the Garen. That's ultimately on the Garen. That's okay. So I really feel like this is going to be okay. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the future of the champion. This is going to be a very, very exciting time to be a Garen main, because these changes do go through and they ship with some adjustments. You guys are definitely going to see Garen as a more popular champion, I think, because this is going to open up a ton of cool stuff for him, and I can't wait to go ahead and showcase it to you guys, because this is really cool. All right. Want to thank everybody for watching. If you guys enjoy my content, you guys want to see more educational Garen display through commentaries or VODs or just my thoughts about future Garen changes, I welcome you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Also, I do stream Garen 6 days a week at twitch.tv/Riste, where I provide a very, very chill and educational stream centered around Demacia. All right? Thanks, everybody, so much for watching. Have a lovely day. Demacia, baby.